In this corner, the DC Multiverse Hawkman from the Black Adam movie, and in this corner, the DC Multiverse Collector Edition comic Hawkman from 0 Hour. After days of stuffing myself with turkey, will I now be eating crow over the overpriced Collector Edition figures? Place your bets, stick around, and don't worry, I'm also going to talk about the Platinum Edition. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Starting with the packaging, and while both do follow the basic gist of a DC Multiverse window box, each one is unique in its own way. The movie version has movie branding, that's also on the side. The comic version, being a collector edition, has silver foil accents. The look has been taken specifically from 0 Hour. The collector editions are also numbered. On the back of the comic version is some pretty striking comic book artwork. The back of the movie version has some artwork as well. Honestly, pretty good artwork. For me, the edge always goes to effort. I like the added number system and the foil of the collector edition, but as nice as this artwork is, it was sourced from an existing DC comic, whereas this artwork was made from scratch for this figure. Between that and all the movie-specific branding, for packaging, this round goes to movie. Also, if anyone's wondering, the Platinum Edition is exactly the same, except of course for the sticker. Moving on to presentation, and both Carters come to 7 1/4 inches, but whereas the movie version's wings are 5 3/4 inches at their widest point, the comic version is a very impressive 9 inches. It's worth noting though that these wings are reused from the Redeemer in McFarlane's Spawn line, whereas the comic version is 100% newly sculpted, wings and all. Hard to say how much he looks like actor Aldous Hodge, but the helmet's impressive. The wings on the sides are very large and made of a softer plastic. Same with the comic version, which also has some extra painted detail. That's not to say the movie version's lacking in paint. The straps and buckles of his harness have been nicely painted, as well as all the trim on his legs. Just like the rest of the costume, the feathers alternate between gold and burgundy. Clearly this version of Hawkman is a Gryffindor, though I don't know, with those wings he might just be the Golden Snitch. Where he lacks painted detail is in the upper forearms. Instead of being painted to match his skin, they've been left solid black to match the wraps. What he lacks there though, he more than makes up for in texture and detail on the costume. That was really one of this assortment's strongest features. The best texturing on the comic version is all the feathers on the wings. Otherwise, the comic version is fairly simple, but McFarlane has done some things to jazz it up. Since this one's based on 0 Hour, he has his puffy blue shorts and pants. The puffies come back for the boots. He does have this one forearm piece though, with some tassels nicely painted on, and the Hawkman logo on his harness is very crisp as well. Long as we're here, I've got to talk about the chest hair. In my Marvel Legends X-Men 97 Wolverine review, I talked about how the body hair was sculpted in, but because it wasn't painted, it just kind of looked like a road rash. Here, the body hair has been both sculpted and lightly painted. As such, this is the most lifelike body hair I've ever seen on an action figure. How frustrating it is then that the Platinum Edition does not include it. As such, it looks like this bird was left in the oven. Because they're his classic colors and the nostalgia for superpowers, I totally get why McFarlane did this version, but I think I speak for pretty much everyone when I say it should not have been a Platinum Edition. Making it Platinum means he has inaccurate gauntlets and shorts, and also boots, which are now just the puffy ones with the lines painted over. Additionally, while the wrist ball on the regular version is flesh tone, it's green on the Platinum Edition, even though we clearly see where the cuff of the glove is. Near as I can tell online, this is the more highly sought after one, but it's clearly the lazier one. The frustrating part is that because McFarlane released it this way, who knows if and when we'll ever get a proper classic Carter. Fortunately, I'm not considering the Platinum Edition in this contest. Not that it matters though, because between the 100% new sculpt, all the texture, and the painted detail, for presentation, this round goes to movie. Moving on to posability, and since this is the same as the regular edition, the Platinum Hawkman's gonna be sitting this round out. From the top, and both Carter Hall heads are on dumbbell joints, but the comic one has long hair, and we all know what that means. It means that Aldous can look all the way up, but the comic cannot. That said, neither one has any trouble looking down. They also also have a great amount of tilt and side to side. I will say the movie version is pretty gappy, which is probably why he has the edge. Moving down in the movie version can only raise his arms up this high. That's because of this clunky shoulder armor. Comic, however, gets just over 90 degrees. They also both have rotator cuffs, but the comic versions is way more functional. As you'd expect, each one has bicep swivel, but I am having a problem with the comic versions popping out when I go to bend the elbows. Just like Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood though, and both of them are double jointed. Pretty sure they're not Hungarian though. They also both have McFarlane style wrist balls that can swivel and hinge either side to side or up and down. Moving to the middle, and to preserve the sculpt, the movie version has a rubber overlay and a dumbbell waist. The comic version has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. They can arch back this far and hunch forward this far, with the comic version admittedly being better than usual. Even so, the movie version does get a bit of tilt. Nothing of course compared to the comic version, but both can twist. Also, when you arch the comic version back, the paint job on the chest hair does actually continue underneath. Below the waist, and both Hawkmen have McFarlane style hips. Each one can kick about 90 degrees, but while the comic version gets a near perfect split, the movie version gets a perfect one. I wonder if Aldous Hodge is that limber in real life. I may have spoken too soon though, because he doesn't have any twist in the hip. The comic version is surprisingly decent in this department. Both of them have double jointed knees, toe articulation, and McFarlane ankle balls that can swivel, hinge, and pivot. But lest we forget the wings. Each figure's wings can hinge up and down, but because of how much smaller the movie versions are, there's really no place for them to go. Additionally, the movie versions can only hinge up and down, whereas the comic versions can hinge and flap. For posability, it should come as no surprise that this round goes to comic. Moving on to playability, and each Hawkman has his signature Morning Star. In addition to the painted strap, there's lots of little sculpted details in the movie version. Granted, the comic version's nice too. The movie version can hold his in either hand, but the comic version can only hold his in his right. Naturally, both versions have figure stands, but the collector edition has the silver detail. Both have trading cards, but the collector edition has the fancy schmancy trading card stand. It also has some silver foil. If you want to read what it says, pause here. But playability is more than just Morning Stars and trading card stands. It's also about how well your figure plays with others. And don't worry, I am including the Platinum Edition in this section. Although a lot of people's first Hawkman figure was superpowers, mine was Total Justice by Kenner. Otherwise, the only Hawks in my nest are these two from DC Direct Brightest Day. Like Mr. Hawkgirl has a broken wing. If McFarlane makes one, I'm very curious as to which color scheme she's gonna go with. As for the rest of the Justice League, and here we have Hush and Action Comics 1000 versions of Superman. Strictly speaking, 0 hours during Superman's mullet phase. But I gotta say, the brighter superpowers colors go great with Hush Superman. Since Hawkman is technically part of the DCEU, I figured I'd bring out Cavill and Batfleck. Something tells me if Hawkman had been in a Snyder movie, he probably would have looked more like this. But to quote Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. Next up is Nightfall and Year 2 versions of Batman. I chose these two because I mainly associate these versions of Hawkman with Batman's blue and gray. If you're curious about Year 2's cape, I simply took the plastic piece off and shoved all the excess in the neck hole. Clip it along for our comparison section, and here's a couple of versions of the Flash. Strictly speaking, Wally was the Flash during 0 hour, but I'm including Jay Garrick for that classic Justice Society flavor. For Green Lantern, and here we have Hal Jordan. Hal being taken over by Parallax was one of the catalysts to 0 hour. As for classic Green Lantern, until McFarlane gives us a proper version, this NECA one is fine for me. Keeping that green energy going, and here's Martian Manhunter. Hawkman and Martian Manhunter, of course, are both harness enthusiasts, and unfortunately both of these Manhunters are a bit too small. Next up is movie and Injustice 2 versions of Dr. Fate. With McFarlane tapping into more classic characters, hopefully a comic version of him is on the horizon, and when he finally does come, I'm sure there'll be a very brightly colored superpower style Platinum Edition version of him as well. And since this version of Hawkman debuted in the Black Adam movie, here he is with comic and movie versions of Black Adam. Personally, I still think that the definitive comic book Black Adam figure is still ahead of us, but until then, I'm pretty happy with this Endless Winter one. For a relative scale comparison, here are all three of our Hawkmen with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here they are with Stealth Iron Man. With the DC Cinematic Universe being reset, it's very unlikely that we're ever going to see these versions of these characters again, and while Zero Hour is a very specific choice, you can still put this one with the rest of your comic display, and despite how I personally feel about the Platinum Edition, it still pairs really well with your Superpowers era collection, or our ever-growing Golden Age display. For playability, this round also goes to Comic. Now if they could just redo Hawkman with new shorts, new boots, and these shades of green and gold. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price, and the battle is tied. Even so, I think we all know how this is gonna go. I'll concede that the comic version's wings are bigger and therefore more plastic, but they've also been reused several times already in the Spawn line. The movie version, by contrast, also has wings, is a 100% new sculpt, and was only $20, and strictly speaking, McFarlane's technically gotten two different figures out of this mold. For price, this round goes to Movie, who wins the battle 3-2. Agree? Disagree? Sound off in the comments and let me know if I was too hard on the Platinum Edition, and what Golden Age characters you hope McFarlane makes next. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.